Hi, everyone. We're just going to give it a few more minutes so that people can join us from the waiting room, and then we can get started. All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, Preserving Publicly Supported Rental Housing Across Pennsylvania. Before we get started, I just want to quickly tell you about the Housing Alliance. We are a statewide coalition working to increase access to safe, decent, and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. Webinars are free for members, so become a member today. You can do that by visiting housingalliancepa.org/become a member or contacting us at info@housingalliancepa.org for more information. Today's webinar will run for an approximately 60 minutes. That includes time for question and answer. We encourage you to leave questions to our incredible group of speakers today. If you want to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A function. You can find that at the bottom right hand of your screen. The chat function is only to ask the Housing Alliance logistical questions about the webinar. So once again, we strongly encourage you to use the Q&A function for questions to ask the presenters. We will email you a recording of this presentation and any associated materials that's being shown in approximately a week's time. I also want to quickly tell you about some of the Housing Alliance's upcoming events. We have the Rural Pennsylvania Housing Summit, which will be held on July 23rd, 2025, at Nittany Lion Inn in State College, Pennsylvania. Registration is now open. You can scan the QR code to the side to pull up the registration page. We also have a few more upcoming webinars. We do a couple a month. The next one will be next week on Tuesday, the 17th, and it will be on protecting resident ownership in manufactured housing communities. The next webinar that we will be doing will be on July 1st, and it will be on protecting housing and homelessness programs. It will be all about federal updates and actions that we can take. So do register. If you scan the QR code to the right side, you can pull up our events page, which will tell you how to register. So really quickly, why are we doing this? Why do we have this webinar? Why now? Why is this important? Thousands of existing affordable units are at risk of being lost from our affordable housing inventory due to expiring restrictions or a backlog of needed repairs. According to the National Housing Preservation Database, over the next 5 years, nearly 12,000 units of private and nonprofit-owned publicly assisted affordable rental housing will reach the end of a restricted covenant agreement. And an investment of resources and technical capacity is needed right now to address the problem at the state and local levels to protect affordable housing long term and for the families that need stability and the foundation that affordable housing provides. Fortunately, there are a number of proven strategies that can help preserve the affordable housing stock in Pennsylvania, and that is what our speakers today will be talking about. So with that, I want to introduce our great group of speakers. We have Dina Schlossberg with Regional Housing Legal Services, Kyla Bayer with Mission First Housing Group, and Kim Crowder with HDC Mid-Atlantic. Thank you, Dina, Kyla, and Kim, for being part of this webinar and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with our audience today. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dina. Let me stop my screen share.
Okay, this is going to be the hardest part for me is getting this right on the screen share. So here we go. Okay, share. Okay, tell me you're seeing just the presentation, not my
Just the
notes. Okay,
presentation,
good.
no
Yeah,
notes.
we see. Okay, good. So thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate. Thanks to the Housing Alliance for providing this opportunity and giving us this forum to talk about something that feels really, really important to those who are interested in affordable housing throughout the state in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I'm going to start with just like an overview of where we are today, particularly in Pennsylvania, and kind of an overview of why is it important to preserve and sort of some of the things you need to think about logistically and kind of how to organize your organization, if you will, or your team, and what you should be doing as you start to think through a preservation strategy. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kyle and Kim, who are going to give great examples and probably more finite details than I'm going to provide. So what do we mean by supported affordable rental housing? We are talking about preserving housing, multifamily rental housing that is publicly assisted. So these are just some of the examples of the programs that are publicly assisted. You all know many of them: HUD assistance, Section 8, Section 202, HUD 811. Had even not just direct funding, but also when there were loans that were provided to the developer, the operator, the owner, in order to develop the real estate, develop the property, and at below market interest rates. So like HUD 236 BMIR. USDA also has an abundance of affordable rental housing that's been publicly assisted under the Section 514 and Section 515 programs. I know that, for instance, HTC Mid-Atlantic, I believe, is acquiring a property that was originally initially developed with USDA 515 financing. There's a low-income housing tax credit program that, like, for the first 30 years, we didn't worry about because we had a lot of 30 years to come and we thought we're going to be affordable forever. 30 years is a long time. And now, guess what? The program's been around long enough to have reached the end of the expiring times for tax credit financing. We have bond financing, we have mortgage financing, we have local financing. These are all publicly supported multifamily rental housing. These are all ways in which you could be publicly supported. Why is it important to preserve? If you're all on this call, you probably already have your own understanding of why. But one, we're in this affordability crisis. Estimated nationally, it's over 7 million units short to serve low and very low income households. Preserving housing is almost always cheaper, not always, but almost always more efficient and less expensive than building new. There was a study done in 2018. I think it was done by Vince Reyna. That study, I think, indicated that it could be up to 45% cheaper or less expensive, I should say, to rehabilitate than it is to start anew. It provides stable and long-term housing options, which builds community and connections, particularly as we're seeing affordable housing being developed in communities that are changing over time. The opportunities for people to live in neighborhoods that are resource rich and as develop the connections to their healthcare, to their schooling, to their friends, to their communities. It's important that we allow people to continue to live in those communities where they can thrive. And then, of course, preserving housing decreases the risk of displacement. There's a really, Chris mentioned the National Housing Law. I think it's the Federal Preservation Database. And if you want to Google it, it's just preservationdatabase.org. But they do a fantastic job of kind of identifying and keeping track of all of the units that are publicly assisted and publicly supported. So this is just an indication of the number of units throughout the United States. It's a really great database because you can search by congressional district, county, state. It's a really magnificent resource. And if we had more time, we would geek out on all the information that's here. But here's where we are federally. Here's like literally just a view of where we are in terms of federally assisted housing nationally. And then here's just a quick snippet of where we are in the state of Pennsylvania. So you can see that we have total assisted homes of about almost 174,000. This is the last time we did a count was in 2020, or last time the database was updated, it was 2023. We've only preserved 735 of those units according to the database. We have about 9,000 units that will be coming to the end of their affordability restrictive periods in the next 5 years of like 9,000 units. So that is like a huge cliff that if we don't protect and preserve this housing, we are going to lose a very, very critical asset for the state of Pennsylvania and for the communities and the people in which we serve. And then the final, sort of numbers on this dashboard indicate kind of the overall shortage of affordable units for people who are low and very low income within the state of Pennsylvania. So I would really encourage people to go and play and look at the dashboard because it's really, really, it's just chock full of really, really good information. So, all right, so now you know you've got a building, you're worried about preservation, you're thinking about, oh my gosh, we have this building that's going to come up and it's going to be at the end of its expiration time, or we're going to be at some critical point in the development and the preservation of this building. What do we do? Where do we start? Who do we need to talk to? Like, now what, right? It doesn't help to wait until you're a year away from or 6 months away from that period of time when the affordability restrictions are going to terminate, or when you have an opportunity to make some kind of shift, such as in the low-income housing tax credit arena in year 15, when the investors are encouraged to leave, and want to find a way to have their interests purchased by another party. So what to do? Here are just a couple really quick takeaways and best practices for owners who are preparing for preservation. One, you got to know your deal and you got to know what's at stake. So you can't just sort of start fresh. You do need to know where in order to go forward, you got to know what you had going backwards, right? You had to know what was the composition of the development or the property, or at the time that it was constructed and began operation. So who were the parties when the property was developed, and who needs to be at the table? Are they the same people or are they different people? Are some of those entities and people even around anymore? Kind of probably the most important question is, what's your goal for preservation? Is it to recapitalize? Is it to kind of shift ownership? Is it to kind of assemble a larger maybe do a larger deal, maybe do some kind of a recapitalization, but involves more than one piece of property? Kind of figure out what is your goal, and then see if the information that you have can help you support that goal. Who do you need at the table to assist you with this process? Now you're like, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to move forward. Who do you need at that table? Who are the parties that are most helpful to you in making that decision? And then what resources will you need to engage in the process? And again, I think from examples, we'll probably have more opportunity to kind of delve into some of these overall arching kind of questions and concerns. You have to stay on top of your key documents from the start. So I would encourage, if you have transaction binders, don't lock them in some storage room that gets so moldy or musty that you won't be able to read the documents when you need them. Or go back to the attorneys or the investors or the lenders who did the deal with you and go, hey, do you have a copy of that transaction binder? We want to scan it, make sure we have it digitized. You kind of have to know when you're going forward and you're going to try to preserve something that was publicly supported, you're going to have a lot of paper, and you're going to have to review that paper and see what are your requirements, what are your obligations, who do you owe what information to, who do you need to get consents and approvals from before you can proceed. So go back to that transaction binder, look at the table of contents, look for the loan agreements, the mortgages and the promissory notes. When do they come due? Look at the regulatory agreements, the indentures, which are the restriction documents. Sometimes they're called indentures, sometimes they're called declarations. Look at the regulatory agreements. Who is regulating currently the use? And what are the requirements and obligations for that regulatory? I mean, you know what they are because you're doing it. What happens if you want to make a shift or a change going forward? And then look at the operating agreements. Like, what did you promise to somebody at the time that you did this, particularly if it's a partnership agreement or some kind of a limited liability company? What are your rights as a partner? What are the rights of your other partners or your other, members in this governance of the building that you operate? So go back and look at those documents, and you're looking for kind of key information. And you're looking for, like, when does the affordability period expire? Who has to provide a notice of the affordability period's expiration, if anybody? Usually it's tenants if it's a HUD building, if you're making a shift, right? If you're going to make some kind of a change. When do the underlying loans that finance your property come due? Because that's important, right? If you're going to go into another plan, you got to know if you have money that's due to somebody now. Will they agree to a new plan? Will they require that you pay it off? Is this a moment for you to renegotiate some of those existing current obligations? Maybe you need consent to do what you want to do. Maybe you're going to get a new partner in the deal. Maybe you're going to refinance. Maybe you're going to have somebody exit your current ownership structure. Do you need to get somebody's approval for that? Do you need to get somebody's consent for that? Do you need to just tell them? most often, if it's anybody, it's PHFA, it's FHLB, it's maybe HUD, maybe it's a redevelopment authority, but kind of look through your documents and make sure you know who you have to get either approval from or just notice to of a significant change. And if you're in a LIHTC transaction, you kind of want to look at year 15, probably at year 12 or year 13 or year 14, and see who has what rights, when can they be exercised, and by whom. So those are kind of like just like this is what you're looking for in those documents when you're going back and looking through the 1,400 pages worth of documents you used when you first constructed. Although I will say if you constructed 30 years ago, you'll only have like 800 pages of documents. You won't have 1,400. It gets longer and larger with every passing year. If you're doing a LIHTC deal, these are some of the documents that we think it's really important for you to look at. Look at the amended and restated agreement of limited partnership or your operating agreement. Understand year 15 is a milestone for the project in terms of asset management and legality. We have clients who are exiting in year 15, and part of their concern is, gosh, our investor was our oversight agent and they made sure we did everything properly. Who's going to do that now if they leave? Like, are we going to be okay? And what are our, does that mean we have no more obligations to anybody? No, you do. You always have to report to PHFA, but understand it is a moment in time that is shifting some of your asset management and perhaps your legal obligations to third parties. And then if this is a year 15, circumstances for the property that you're looking at trying to preserve, have a plan that includes when and how you're going to buy out your limited partner or the investor that's part of the transaction. If this is a tax credit deal, we mostly focus on tax credits for this, but I think a whole HUD refinancing and how you recapitalize and all of the myriad of programs is its own. Could be multiple webinars, but some of the base questions and concerns and kind of ways in which you would approach a preservation is going to be the same, whether it's LIHTC or whether it's HUD. But again, if you have a year 15, a best case scenario is you have a nonprofit or some other party who steps into the shoes of the limited partner and they exit, and only thing they require you pay is you basically assume the existing debt on the property, and maybe you have to pay some exit taxes. The investor leaves the deal, the nonprofit is left firmly entrenched in control, and there's a financing plan in hand for recapitalization of the development, and you do it in one big, grand, another 1,400 page, transaction. That's like the best case scenario. It is not typical for people to be in such a position by year 15 to know what they're going to need a lot of detail and information about the property, what its needs are, how to assess the costs that may come with recap. What are you trying to achieve with the property? What is its needs from a property perspective? And then there's like just, multiple other, you got to raise that revenue, right? You got to raise the money. So it's not typical that you get this year 15 best case scenario, but if you can get it, that's pretty grand. Some of the worst case possible outcomes is if you have an investor who is beginning to fight back on, particularly on a nonprofit, having the rights to exercise their rights under the agreements that were entered into back 15 or 16 or 17 years ago. We have seen much more litigation and much more pushback from investors in the last, say, 5, 6, 7 years than we did in the beginning parts of the low-income housing tax credit program. If you are a nonprofit who is involved in a low-income housing tax credit program and development, and you have a right of first refusal, and you are getting pushback for the ability to exercise your rights, please reach out to me, reach out to people in my, in our organization. We will either hook you up with really good litigation counsel, this is what they do full time, or we will help you if there's something that we can do, like, to work. We work pretty carefully and we work pretty aggressively with the investors to get a successful exit strategy. Red flags if you're an owner approaching preservation. Investor LP interests have changed hands. If an LP limited partner's interests have changed hands, often the party who's now the limited partner doesn't have the same affinity or desire to be supportive and helpful to the nonprofit as it might have been in the very beginning. As they change hands, they kind of lose that connection. So pay careful attention if there has been a new investor that's been brought into your development. Keep a track of how they are communicating and how they are approaching year 15 and other transactions. I don't really need to go through all of these, but the steps to take, I would say, is just you have to know who your parties are and you have to know who your partners are. So make sure you review your documents, you know your deadlines, and you contact your transactional counsel so that they can support what your agenda is, particularly if you're in a year 15 and you're trying to have an investor exit. Some big takeaways. Um, if you are in a low-income housing tax credit transaction or you're doing one now, this is a good time for you to plan for year 15. So this is like from a preservation strategy, 15 years from now, we want to be farther and smarter along than we were today for what happened 15 and 30 years before. Start to look at this now. Make sure you negotiate really strong protective measures for you as if you're a nonprofit, so that you have the rights and you're afforded the rights that the low-income housing tax credit program provides to you. If you're a for-profit, also make sure that your investor is giving you the time that you need to be able to buy them out. Don't accept a 30-day. You have to let us know, and then if you don't let us know in 30 days whether or not you're going to buy us out, you have to move on and you have to sell to a third party. So watch for red flags along the way. If you're beginning to get some resistance from your investor, if they're beginning to hold you accountable, making claims that you have defaulted or you're on a watch list for something, it may be a way for the investor to try to crowd you out and not allow you as the nonprofit or you as the general partner of that nonprofit to exercise your rights in year 15. So it's important to kind of watch your partner along the way. Don't assume that they're always going to be as on the same page with you as you would hope they would be. But broader lessons for preservation, the importance of asset management and knowing your portfolio. I think it is brilliant that both HDC and Mission First are here because both have really focused on asset management over the years and have paid attention to their portfolio. And that's a brilliance that is not done by a lot of particularly nonprofits. So it's really critical that you know your portfolio and you begin to structure how you think about your role as the owner operator from an asset management perspective, not just like, day to day, but from a long-term strategy of managing your assets. You have to have staff who have the training and capacity that they need to address these preservation needs. And that's, not always the in-house staff that you have for development. So think about how you can amplify your staffing if that's needed. Think about the risks, opportunities, and the resources that are available for help as you're moving forward with a plan. Be realistic about your organizational capacity. Again, there are so many organizations who have developed real estate for affordable housing over the years because they were church-based, because they were mission service, they were mission-based. They were doing this for a mission. Sometimes they only had one building. Sometimes they only had two. Sometimes it was completely volunteer-led who did the development. And now it's 30 years later, or 15 years later, or 20 years later. Is that the same structure that you need going forward? Maybe you need a partner. Maybe you need to bring in another party who can have the longevity. If your goal is to make sure that the people who are living and residing in the building have security for a long term and that the building remains affordable, you might need to bring in a partner. You might need to make a shift, right? Talk with your agency partners and often let HUD, PHFA, local government, DCED, Federal Home Loan Bank know your intentions. Make them your partners. Let them know what you're planning. And then keep tenants engaged and up to date on your plans. Tenants, they can hear rumors. Oh, I hear you're going to sell. Oh, I hear the investor's leaving. We've seen things where investors are sending letters saying we're exiting, and that flips out tenants, right? They don't really understand what that means. So just make sure you keep your tenants engaged and up to date on plans so they don't flip out. And with that, I probably went over time, so I apologize. But I think we're going to take some questions at the end. And I'm
Thank you,
just
Dina.
sharing if I can figure out how to do that. Okay.
Very nice.
Chris?
Yes, let me know, Kyla, if your screen share is working.
Okay. Okay, one second. Let's see.
Hi, everyone. While Kyla pulls up the presentation, I just want to remind everyone
Perfect.
to use the Q&A function to leave questions to our presenters. I see it, Kyla.
Okay.
Very nice without the notes.
Okay, terrific. Hello, everybody. Dina, that was really terrific and very important advice. So thank you for sharing that. My name is Kyla Bayer. I'm a senior developer at Mission First Housing Group. We did get a list of who's attending today, and it's great to see so many familiar people. For those of you who don't know me, I've been doing affordable housing for about 30 years. I spent some time as a consultant and then moved into a director of development role at the Montgomery County Housing Authority for a long time, and then landed here at Mission First a few years ago. Um, I know we're here to talk a lot about all sorts of preservation projects, and I have a few to share with you. I just wanted to start off with a bit of background information about Mission First. For the past 35 years, we've developed and managed affordable, safe, sustainable homes for people in need, focusing on the most vulnerable. Our region is the Mid-Atlantic. We span from Virginia all the way through Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We do affordable housing development, construction, property management, resident services, and I left one off that I should have included, especially after Dina's introduction. We also have an asset management department. We have 4,000 affordable apartments, and we house more than 6,000 people. We have about 1,000 apartments in the development pipeline today. Our preservation experience is extensive, and most of it is preserving what we currently own or what we've owned over the years. Since 2010, we've preserved 1,100 units of affordable housing over 15 developments. About 3/4 of these were in Pennsylvania and the remainder in DC. We are in the process of preserving an additional 380 units in our pipeline, and it's our goal to reach over 1,400 in the next several years. As the title slide promised, I am here to talk about three Mission First preservation stories. One is about a downtown building, another is about some mid-rises in West Philadelphia, and the third is about 40 scattered sites. Dina did a great job laying the groundwork. What I'm going to spend some time talking about today is what happens after you do the work that Dina mentioned. And so let's kick it off with that downtown building. It's called Mid-City Apartments. And what's unique about Mid-City Apartments is that all of its occupants are formerly homeless. It's located just off of Rittenhouse Square at 20th and Chestnut. It has the support of its neighbors, and there is a high school in the first 3 stories of the building, and the residence is in the top 4 stories of the building. So I'll say that if we can do preservation here, you can do it anywhere. Our story of Mid-City dates back to 2016 when the city, who is the building's owner, approached us to acquire Mid-City from a for-profit developer. The goal was to save the building and the crucial supportive housing that it provides. So we accepted and we managed the building with some capital investment, but as the building aged, we determined that it needed substantial renovation and recapitalization. The last time it was renovated was 1998. All systems and finishes had reached the end of their useful life. So we designed a preservation project that would accomplish several goals for the building and for the residents. Whoop, sorry, I went back a slide. You're getting a preview. So as I was saying, we had several goals for the project. The first goal was to convert physically the many single room occupancies that were in this building to efficiencies. And as most of you know, single room occupancies are rooms with bathrooms, but they don't have a kitchen. So they share kitchens in the building, and it tends to create conflict, and it's very hard to maintain. So we took every three SROs and converted them to two efficiencies, which ultimately reduced the total units from 60 to 53, but residents really feel and staff really feel that it was worth it. The result is a 53 unit building with 41 efficiencies and 12 bedrooms, 12 one bedrooms. The second goal is to design a building that would appear like a downtown residence. And so we engaged our architect firm, CBP Architects, who does both high-end condo and affordable housing design. And their involvement provided us this high-end design aesthetic using affordable materials. And the third was to provide space for supportive services and community activities to facilitate the residents' journey to self-sufficiency, given who our target population is for this building. And we ended up with actually three offices for supportive services, a community room, a library area, and computers for resident use. The project is nearing completion this summer. It will have taken 24 months from the start of construction. And I'd say that the most significant challenge we faced in this building was the intersection of construction phasing and relocation in a partially occupied building. I do want to make a note as it follows up from something that Dina was saying. This is a RAD building. We have 48 of the 53 units were RAD, but we had to convert that from a prior homeless mod rehab contract, which was its own challenge in and of itself. The second story I wanted to bring up today is a project we call Philadelphia Preservation. It is comprised of 4 individual buildings, 3 of which are mid-rises in University City section of West Philadelphia. 2 of these buildings were tax credit deals previously. 2 of them are not, but are occupied by qualifying tenants. There's a total of 84 units, and we combined them all to form one 4% LIHTC bond deal. We're working towards closing at the end of the year. Many of you probably know when you do this kind of combination, which Dina also mentioned, the way PHFA wants to see it is as 4 separate applications and 1 aggregate application. So it's a tremendous amount of work just from the paperwork standpoint, 4 cost certifications, 4 bins, 4 8609s, etc. The scope of work here for construction was determined by a matrix model, which was different than mid-city apartments. Mid-city apartments, we really took a gut rehab approach. But here, the buildings, while not in great shape, don't need the extent of a gut rehab. So each unit has its own scope of work. What makes this project challenging? Well, it's an occupied rehab, which is always challenging. And unlike in Mid-City, where we relocated tenants fully on site, we are looking to both relocate tenants here at Philadelphia Preservation, both on site and under a master lease off site. And that will then give us sufficient vacant units to rehabilitate 1 floor at a time and in 2 buildings simultaneously. The second goal, the second challenge, I should say, I guess it's a goal, but is to coordinate and both relocation and construction. So in order to free up the units in the phase that you are beginning, you need to sometime move residents into newly completed units. And to do that, you have to allow time for the resident to get ready to do that. And then you also need to ensure that you have a phased temporary certificate of occupancy. And so you need to allow for time for that as well. And I guess that goes into the third challenge that we have in this project is getting it done on time. We have an 18-month time frame to complete construction, which is very tight for 4 buildings. The budget is also tight, and we can't extend much past that in order to keep our interest expense in line. So we're sort of watching every moment, and we're planning the process of relocation, occupancy, and construction very tightly. I'll shift to the third story. Picture 40 scattered site row homes with no more than 2 on a block located across West Philadelphia. They range from 2 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms. Each of them are unique and none of them are handicap accessible. All need renovation. This is our West Philadelphia Preservation Scattered Site deal. It is a 9% LIHTC deal, and we are waiting to hear back from from the agency on this round. The scope of work was determined through a matrix model again. But the biggest challenge here, well, there's a lot of challenges with a 40 unit deal, but I would say the biggest challenge is the handicap accessibility. To meet the PHFA accessible unit point category, you must have all the floors of a building accessible. And you can see from the first 3 houses, there are many steps to get to the first floor and then to get to the second floor. And so incorporating lifts and elevators is possible, but it's very expensive and very difficult to maintain. Our solution instead was to take a lot that we owned and build 5 new accessible 2 bedroom units on it. And that's the fourth picture, the fourth rendering. And interestingly enough, when we presented this to PHFA, we weren't sure what their response was going to be, but they did approve this concept as part of a preservation deal. Even though there was new construction in it, they did not make us go into a different set aside. They allowed us to stay in the preservation set aside. So from these challenges, we have lessons. And I think the first that I would say is how best laid plans can easily turn into the domino effect when it comes to preservation. And a lot of that has to do with building in an occupied structure. Coordinating the construction and relocation schedules is very challenging. And when one piece of the process doesn't deliver, those best laid plans often end up looking like a domino effect. The plans then need to be restructured, often continuously. The more phases the project has, the more complicated it gets. And all this is to say that having a team that is both flexible and experienced in occupied rehab is critical. The other lesson I would reinforce is something that seems obvious in that it's planning for operating viability, right? You're not going to do the deal unless it works and pencils out. But often operating viability depends upon factors outside the control of the developer. For example, the requirements that have to do with the renewal or transfer of subsidy sources. When does that new subsidy come into a deal? What are the funding agency's restrictions on rent increases for occupied units? All of that factors into revenue calculation. Understanding these constraints early on is really important. And planning for operating deficits during construction in an occupied preservation deal is critical due to the number of vacancies required with each construction phase. The last lesson we've talked a little bit about, or I've shared a little bit with you throughout this presentation, and that has to do with scope determination. As I mentioned, at Mid-City, due to the age and the condition of the existing units in the building, we opted for a gut rehab approach. But it's our experience in other preservation deals that a unit-specific scope, often referred to as the matrix model, tends to be more cost-effective. It does require a lot of attention to detail on the part of the architect and the contractor, which further underscores the point of having qualified and experienced team members, but it tends to also save money. So to close out, I thought it would be nice to see some before and after pictures of Mid-City just to evidence what we all know. Preservation, while it can be hard and frustrating, in the end is worth it. And this was underscored to me a few months ago when I was talking with Miss Betty Smith, a resident at Mid City, and she said about her new apartment, "When I walk through this door now, it's my home." So this is the door that she's basically walking through into this rendered lobby. This is where she came from, the before pictures. I'll say that we worked really hard to preserve the blue and pink floor tile and the terracotta bathroom tile that was high on our priority. I'm just kidding. We ended up with these units, both efficiencies and one bedrooms, living areas, closets, bathrooms, accent walls in every unit. And it has paid off. So thank you. I will leave it to you, Chris, for questions later.
Thank you, Kyla. Next up, we have Kim.
Okay, give me 1 second on the technology here. Here we go.
I see your slides. Oh, very nice. That's perfect.
Good. Okay. Excuse me. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be able to talk to you about the projects that we're currently working on. It's a hard thing. I didn't realize that when we set up the lineup here that I get to go after Dina and Kyla because for heaven's sakes, they're both so great and know so much about preservation. I'll see what I can do to try to fill in any spots here. I'm sure I'll be referencing a lot of the things that they've already mentioned because it's just good. It's just good business. And so we're going to be looking at long-term stability through preservation, through acquisition. I think that we're going to take like a little bit of a different turn, a different look at it, so that everyone can see what it looks like from a different angle. Maybe your organization doesn't have buildings that are old enough to be able to put into preservation deals, but you're still interested in it. And there are opportunities to be able to acquire properties where you can do that. Just a little bit about HDC. I could just take Kyla's about Mission First page and put it right into this one because we're very similar. We do a lot of the same things. And so HDC is a developer and property manager. We have over 3,800 units on 65 campuses, and we operate in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. We have, I think the number that always gets me is that we have over 7,000 households currently on our waiting list, which I think definitely goes to underscore the need to preserve affordable housing and the need to create more affordable housing for sure. I'm going to be talking today about two different projects that we have. I mentioned just a minute ago that we're going to be talking about acquisition for preservation, protecting a potential loss of affordability. While HDC has plenty of units in our portfolio, we are a nonprofit and our mission is to make sure that there is housing for everyone. We also often try to provide housing for the most vulnerable populations. And so through our nonprofit efforts, we really look to make sure that we are maintaining affordability. And I think Dina, kind of mentioned that when she was doing her portion. And so we are constantly asked, we're not even always looking for it. Sometimes, a lot of times it comes to us. Hey, there's an opportunity. We may be losing some units here. And we would really like if you would take a look and see if it's something that HDC could acquire and potentially maintain the affordability of it. I think, especially now as Dina was talking, I think, because we're in that zone, right? The tax credits were developed the program was developed in the 80s and then, kind of really rolled out in the 90s. That's where it really got its, its momentum. And here we are. And all of the affordability. It's not just the compliance piece with the investors that we are running up against at this point. It's actually the end of the affordability period. And so, it really does get scary we are working on another project that I'm not going to be presenting on today, but we're working on a project right now in Reading. And I will tell you that there are several affordable communities in Reading that right now are in the process of being converted to market rate. And so it has created a real crunch in Reading with the need for affordable housing there. Okay. So affordability, the loss of affordability. The project I'm going to be talking about today, one of the projects has to be, currently is in Montgomery County. And in Montgomery County right now, where our first case study resides, affordable housing has never been more important. I don't know how many of you know much about Montgomery County, but Montgomery County lost its shelter for single adults, and so has been operating without a shelter for homeless single adults. And so between the rising costs and the lack of a shelter, it is at a critical level right now. I'm going to have to move our, there we go. Sorry. The gallery was blocking my slide there. So why is preservation more important than ever? I just mentioned, the 30 to 40 year affordability periods ending. Pardon me. Owners not wanting to work through compliance issues, because for heaven's sakes, if you're here, you must be interested in affordable housing, and there's a considerable amount of compliance that goes through the work that we do, and sometimes the owners are just tired. There's also, Pew just released a study that said across the majority of Pennsylvania, rents have increased 41% over the last several years. Investment in the infrastructure is imperative for the long-term viability of the building. Excuse me. The other piece is not just the long-term viability, but don't forget our costs to maintain the buildings continue to increase. Excuse me. I was doing so good. And so we want to make sure that while we're preserving, we're also keeping our eye on what the expenses will be on the other side of the preservation, ensuring that we're not just maintaining the building itself, but also investing in items that will help us maintain the affordability to manage the building on the other side. Excuse me. So this is the first building that I want to talk about. This is our Norriswood community. Norriswood is part of a larger 4% deal that we did. And it's a $31 million 4% deal. The total development costs are $31 million. This is one of 3 buildings that creates that 4% deal. It has 42 units. If you know Montgomery County, this is on Arch Street. And so this is 4 separate buildings, total of 42 units. 40 of the 42 have RAD, and this one had massive improvements. This building we acquired in 2018 and submitted for 4% in 22. And so we're in the process of construction now. We did asbestos remediation, new electrical service on the entire campus, new furnaces, new hot water heaters, brand new manager's office, because when this was built, it wasn't required to have managers in the building at that time. So there was actually no management office in the building. So we were able to take some space that we were able to create an office for the manager and for our resident services folks to be able to go down there and be able to spend more time with the residents. New flooring, new kitchens, new appliances, and a whole brand new landscaping program out front. Excuse me, this is in an area in Norristown where there's a lot of new construction directly across the street from this. They recently closed a school, and so they're putting in a huge campus of townhomes, and it's really important to us, while we're doing all the other things we're doing, that we're also maintaining the curb appeal for the building, as we're in a neighborhood that really has a lot of revitalization happening. And so, we want to make sure that we're keeping up with the other things that are going on in that area. So acquisition for recapitalization, this is something that HDC really works hard at looking at. And so we have a 5 to 10 year plan for recapitalization of our own portfolio. And we also look, as I mentioned, at acquiring other communities in order to preserve their affordability and also to sometimes match them with our deals. And so sometimes you can combine 2 communities in the HDC portfolio to create a bond project, or you can put maybe 2 communities from HDC and combine that with something new that you're looking to purchase or acquire. And depending on the size and scope of the project, Kyla talked a little bit about that. Depending on the size and scope of the project, it can overall the amount of work that needs to be done. You can do more units or less units depending on the amount of work that has to be done and the cost for doing all of that work. So TC5 is a major investment into the long-term viability and the affordability of the 3 buildings that I mentioned. When you close, you record a new indenture that maintains affordability for the next 40 years. So if you're out there and you acquire a building and you want to preserve it, wrapping it up into a 4% deal or some type of revitalization program really can extend the life of the affordability long beyond many of us that are certainly on the lineup here. So the next group will be managing the revitalization in 40 years from now. And I mentioned we were able to combine this with a RAD conversion to protect the deep affordability offered at this community. And again, which is so important right now, as I mentioned, that Montgomery County really is in a critical situation with their homeless population and also with folks being able to afford housing there. So the other project I'm going to talk about is our Scranton bond deal. This one is not in construction yet. We're in the process of closing this deal, so I'm not going to have the before and after pictures like Kyla had. But I do want to talk to you about the buildings, how they came to be, how we got them, what we're looking at, and things that you might consider if you're looking to do a deal like this. And so this came to us through the Archdiocese up in Scranton, and there were 4 buildings that they had that the Archdiocese was looking to get out of. And I'm sure many of us have had conversations in and around the Archdiocese as they are moving a lot of their programs and developments off of their books currently. And so in this case, these were in the Scranton area. And so I'm going to talk about the buildings, how we put them together, and how we kind of put this deal together here. So the first building is St. Thomas Court Apartments in Hazleton. This is just 20 apartments here. The next building is St. Catherine Manor. That's in Scranton, PA. That's 60 apartments. This is St. John Apartments in Wilkes-Barre in Pennsylvania, 24 apartments. Excuse me. And this is St. Vincent Apartments in Plymouth, PA. So, and this is 19 apartments. And they're, reasonably close together. They're not on top of each other, but, they're within an hour drive of each other. And so we acquired these from the Archdiocese because there were market rate developers who were looking to convert these buildings to market rate apartments. And so we stepped in to acquire the buildings from the Archdiocese and then decided to convert them all, to combine them all and put them into a 4% deal. Okay, so considerations, some of these you might have seen already. Oops, I'm so sorry. I keep trying to move the gallery here. So due diligence and preparation are keys to success. You heard Dina saying over and over again about ensuring that you understand partnership agreements and all of those things. So while I talk about acquisition and maybe it might sound easy, I can tell you that we take a very hard look at every single building that we purchase. We have a huge procedure that we've developed for it that includes all of the due diligence that HDC requires before we would acquire a building. And so we know exactly what we're getting. We do 100% inspections of all the buildings. We review all of the legal documents. We run title reports. And so understanding exactly what you're getting into before you purchase the building will save you a lot of headaches. Doesn't mean you say no to the project, but at least you know what's coming your way so that you can prepare for it. And so I cannot stress that enough. As I just mentioned, the considerations, due diligence is just the most important thing prior to the acquisition for preservation. I mentioned full building inspections, title reports, legal reviews, pricing for improvements. The other thing I would mention is that sometimes the closings can take long on these deals, depending on how many people you have. On the first deal I was showing you, TC5, when we were closing, we were trying to close by the end of the year, 24. And at the last call, we had 57 people on the closing call. So sometimes it takes a lot to get okay, we acquired it, we brought it on board, we know exactly what we have. Okay, now we put it into a deal, and now we go, okay, great, here we go, we're ready to start construction. Now you have to close. And so the closing is not any easier or harder than a 9%, I don't think. I don't know what Kyla thinks, but it's roughly about the same effort. And the same timeline in order to close those deals. And so I would say make sure that you're prepared for that, number one. And also, if it takes that long, the other thing, which I mentioned, is the pricing for improvements. Once you've developed your scope, depending on how long it takes you to get through this process and get to the closing table, you may need to either rewalk the buildings or, and more importantly, you may need to reprice it. And so to ensure that when you get to closing that you have the most accurate cost for the job, what you don't want to do is sign a contract with the contractor and close and then realize that you can't complete all the work you said you were going to complete because you don't have enough money to do it anymore. So again, highly recommend making sure, Dina was talking about folks that you need to, stakeholders that you need to have conversations with. And once you get past the idea that, okay, we're going to do this, we see a path, we can make this deal go, then you need to make sure that you have the rest of your crew on board. And the next group of stakeholders that you need are all your development folks, and making sure that they are completely involved from the beginning so that you can have the cleanest path to get to closing and starting your construction. You also consider how to package them. Some buildings can stand on their own, potentially. Excuse me. You may have other buildings in your portfolio you compare them with. You can notice that when I talked about we call them the Saints. When we talk about the Saints properties, we have 3 smaller buildings and 1 larger one. And other considerations, I highly recommend also getting comfortable with the carrying costs and repair needs of these buildings while you're holding them, because the buildings, if you acquire a building like this, in order to turn it into a 4%, what you want to do is make sure that you are comfortable with whatever it's going to cost you to hold it while you're waiting for all the other things to happen. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you all. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Kyla. That was incredibly informative. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did too. We have about 2 minutes left. I do want to say, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to our presenters. I will be including their emails on our webpage when the materials and recordings for this presentation go out. So thank you all for being with us here today. Thank you to our presenters. And yeah, have a good rest of your day, everyone. Bye.